and that will allow us to assign the div that we're going to create, which will contain the description. So just as an example, I'm going to go ahead and create just a div down here, and this will allow me to relay back the coordinates of my mouse position. Now the reason I'm doing this is just so we can see how everything works before we start to write the code, because it's important to know what you're actually obviously doing when you're writing the code. And this often I create divs just to give me an idea of the feedback. So I'm just going to call this CO, just short for coordinates, I guess. And inside of hovertext.js, I'm going to go ahead and relay some coordinates into this CO div. Now there's one thing that we need to do, and we need to return a particular object associated with moving the mouse over this particular element. And we need to we need to put just a variable name inside here. And E is now an object, and this represents a few things, but we're going to be using the client Y and the client X parts of this object. So what I want to do is now inside of here I want to say .text. We're just going to be placing text with this inside this div here. Obviously it's invisible on the page, but once we start to hover over, we'll start to return some feedback. So inside .text I want to place some text. Now usually the text would be like this, and then when you were to go and hover over this, the text would appear. So what we can do with this is we can constantly feedback something from this E object that we've called E, and this is first of all client Y. We have X and Y coordinates of where the mouse is at, so I'm just going to say, for example, this is just to append on this. I'm going to say, or we'll say X first, and that's E.clientX, and then I'm going to append on just a space and then Y, and then I'm going to append on E.clientY. So what we're doing is, when the mouse is moved over, we're taking the X and Y position from this object, and we're just saying X, well, we're displaying this to the user, and then we're taking client X from this E object. And then what we're doing is we're showing Y, and we're doing the same, but we're taking the client Y part of this object. So now you'll see that when we move our mouse over here, we get an accurate display of coordinates, so we can see where the mouse is at its position. Now this is relative to the entire document. You'll probably notice if I come just up to the top of this link here, you see we've got 10 and 12. Now this is because the X and Y starts from here, the very top left hand corner, and then stretches down to the end of the document. So what we're essentially doing is, wherever this element is placed on our page, we're not placing the div with the coordinates relative to the object, we're placing it relative to the whole document. So maybe that doesn't make sense, and maybe it's not relevant, but it's important to know that these coordinates don't represent the entire stretch of this object or the size of this object. It's for the whole document itself. So regardless of that, it will still work. So we can go ahead and actually start to display this at particular coordinates. So now that we've seen that example, we can get rid of that, and we can go ahead and get rid of the div that we've just displayed that out into. It's not needed now. So the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to return a description of a particular object. So in this case it's a link. Now I'm going to create a custom attribute onto the inside of this link, and that's going to be called hover text. So I'm just going to write hover text equals something. So much like href and class and anything else, we're taking an attribute from this link. So here I'm going to write Google, a powerful search engine. So now what we can do is, when we hover over this, we can obtain the attribute hover text, which is associated with this object. And again, if you were to go ahead and create more objects, you could just simply apply the class hover, and then go ahead and apply the class hover, the class hover and the attribute hover text. So this is essentially what we're going to be displaying to the user when they hover over a particular element. So quite simple, but we need to find a way to grab this hover text attribute from this current class. Now it's important to note that if we were to have, say, two different links, let's just go ahead and paste this down here. Let's just change this link here and change this description, and then change the what's displayed to the user. So now we've got two links. We have two different attributes. So we've got hover text and hover text. They're both the same, but they both hold different values, and we want them to display different values. We're keeping the same class name, however we want the hover text to remain different. So what we can do is we can test out taking this attribute from the current element that's being hovered over. Now because we have the same class name, we can't just reference from that particular class, and I'll show you why we can't do that. So I'm going to first of all set a variable called description, or just call it hover text, and that's going to be equal to, and remember when we use a selector we use dot something, so dot hover dot attribute, and then we name the attribute.